So over, well, certainly the weekend, because we still haven't heard either way yet. He may have announced it. He might not have yet. We'll have to wait and see. But of course, a lot, well, maybe not as many as we think, Tory MPs want Boris to run again. Now, I said this on one of my Good Morning shorts. Boris running again would be absolutely ridiculous. It is such a idea that has no logic to it whatsoever. It is a stupid idea, and it's an idea that reeks of desperation. So desperate are these Tory MPs to at least maybe try and see off somewhat of a disaster because they're still obsessed with that Johnson electoral magic. But here's the thing. In the 2019 general election where Boris Johnson was running, many of the people who switched their votes from Labour or even the Brexit party to Conservatives did so under the belief that Boris Johnson was the guy to get Brexit done. Brexit has been, quote unquote, been done by Boris Johnson. You cannot rerun that election again. Not only that, Johnson is going to be stuck with a load of austerity. And trust me, they are going to want to put a serious, treasurer with him. They ain't going to give him a nodding dog like he probably desperately wants. And as a result, we're going to see more fights between him and his chancellor. Maybe even having a number of chancellors with Boris Johnson. Who knows how it could work out, but that's theory crafting. But what we're watching today, or sort of responding today in this case, is one Sir Christopher Chope, one of the particular Tory MPs who is absolutely desperate to get Boris Johnson back into the office. And honestly, maybe I could have done the interview with the Dean Doris because that is just crazy. But this goes to show you a different direction of what some Tory MPs seriously consider to why Boris Johnson is a serious candidate again to be Prime Minister. So before we go jumping into this, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, well, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help and support the channel. Of course, down below, there is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, the YouTube subscription, where you can join the Pony Club, where you get bells and whistles and whatnot when you subscribed up to that. So, as always, off we go. Today, this interview was on Sky News. But yes, let's go diving into it, and shall we?
To you, Sir Christopher, thanks very much indeed for talking to us. First of all, your reaction to the last 24 hours and the resignation of Liz Truss.
Well, I think it's appalling, actually, and I apologise. I feel
appalling. How appalling? That's the question. Is he bad that, of course, the chaos that has been caused around Liz Truss, or is he appalled for another reason?
Ashamed of my revolting colleagues, actually. They brought down another Prime Minister, and that's the same people who are largely responsible who brought down Boris Johnson. And we're now in a dire state because basically the Conservative Parliamentary Party has proved itself to be ungovernable. And that's going to be a problem that will beset any successor unless that successor gets a mandate from the British people, a fresh mandate.
So essentially there he's advocating that at least whoever comes in will have significant problems because the Tory factionalism is a massive problem. And bear in mind, Boris Johnson also had a similar problem with Tory factionalism. It was basically one faction got fed up with him lying so much and all the constant scandals that eventually just one scandal was just too much and they had to get rid of him. I mean, it's really difficult to actually try and remember the amount of scandals that Boris Johnson was literally up to his eyeballs in. It was absolutely crazy. And to say that they had to get rid of him is true, because many Tories did recognise the damage that Johnson was doing to the Tory brand name. Now, this guy thinks the exact opposite. As far as he was concerned, as we'll find out in a bit, Boris Johnson was really the bee's knees. But he's also right in one factor, that whoever does come in really doesn't have a mandate. And maybe we might see them call a general election. It's a possibility. It's not a certainty, but it is a possibility. But remember, the Tories are going to be desperate to try and avoid a general election at all costs. That to them is the worst possible outcome. They would rather limp on to the next general election with a complete lame duck prime minister than face a general election. But anyway, we'll see him continue what else he has to say.
For the British people, and I think that will calm the parliamentary party, and hopefully they will then have some respect for the new leader.
So you blame your fellow Tory MPs, you call them revolting, but some would say that Liz Truss has brought this on herself. It was her mini-budget that caused such upset in the market, saw the cost of borrowing rise and people's mortgage costs go up.
And she and the reporter here on Sky News is completely right. The mini budget is entirely the fault of Liz Truss. But one of the things I've been trying to get across to you all is that, look, this free market fundamentalism is deeply interwoven into some of these Tory MPs. What Liz Truss did to them, those policies were fine. They were right and correct. The only problem is what a lot of them are now desperately trying to say is that, oh, maybe it wasn't the right time to do these policies, or maybe these policies weren't communicated directly. So don't get me wrong, these ideas and policies that Liz Truss put forward, the Tory MPs who still want them are out there. And of no surprise, they are all the hardcore Brexiteers, so they are still there. Those ideas are still there, and we are about to hear one guy go to bat for them right now.
No, that's not correct. She was being undermined from the moment that she had been chosen by 58% of the...
No. No. Liz Truss did really not start having problems until that mini budget hit. Once that mini budget hit, that was where she started to have problems. The economy started to tank. The pound went on a complete run. Housing markets started to crash. Mortgages started to raise in price. People stopped buying, government debt, which is a massive part of, governmental, policy and modern day economies. It just started to stop because of the very policies Liz Truss had announced. And it almost happened instantaneously from that announcement. And at that point, many Tory MPs just went, what on earth's going on here? What's happening? So this idea that a lot of them are trying to sort of put forward that Liz Truss was right, it's just that the way she did it was wrong. And that's still a core problem that they still don't want to admit, that it was the policies that she was putting forward which caused this massive rout and many Tory MPs to literally go, what is going on? Because one of the things the Tories pride themselves on continuously, and they love to say it, we are the party of fiscal responsibility. The economy is in safe hands with us. Well, Liz Truss has just proven, and even this guy is showing that there are still Tory MPs who are desperately wanting to follow that free market economic mindset that will crash the economy, and they really don't want to put it to a general election, essentially. I mean, put it this way, if they put another free market fundamentalist in to replace Truss, and they pursue those exact same economic goals, they will crash the economy as well. And those Tory MPs that do not follow that ideology will also want them out. This is why we said at the very beginning, Tory factionalism is still a massive problem.
The people in the country and the Conservative members as our leader. When she went to the party conference, she was being undermined by Michael Gove and others. And then when she came forward with, I thought was an excellent proposal to put a cap on energy prices, that caused an issue in the markets. And instead of trying to calm things,
so he's blaming it there on, oh no, it was an energy plan. That's what really caused the problems, not the fact that she was going to basically unleash trickle-down economics of an unheard of level with massive underfunded tax cuts, massively cutting and slashing, how much the rich people of this country would have really had to pay, because again, it was all about trickle-down economics. If you tax people at the top less, then somehow, in some way, shape, or form, all this money comes trickling down. But as I'm sure you're very well aware of, and even on this channel, we've gone through economist after economist explaining just how wrong that policy Liz Truss was pursuing really was.
Down. Her detractors tried to make it even more difficult for her. And the consequence is we've now lost a prime minister who had some really good ideas on growth and low taxes. And
see, what did I tell you? Oh, these are really good ideas, but Liz Truss was just put out because, there were just too many people who just could not see the sheer brilliance of Liz Truss.
So we are now in a maelstrom.
And in a maelstrom now, so who do you want to see take over then?
Well, I don't see that there's really any of the candidates who are coming forward are going to command my support. And I think that the news...
I love that. A lot of instant admission there that all these sort of pro-Borises, even though he has said a big problem in the Tory party is that, hey, we've got all this factionalism that's making us ungovernable, you've got an admission from one of, the Boris pushers that anyone else but Boris, we're not going to respect their authority. We're going to cause trouble for them. This is a completely ungovernable Tory party. And it all goes back to all that factionalism, all that difference in ideology that the Tory party has been cooking since Brexit.
That Boris Johnson might be riding to the rescue of the country and the Conservative Party is really a great tonic. And I'm really excited about that prospect because I didn't want him to be deposed in the first place. I said we'd rue the day that he was.
Why on earth would you not want him gone? Boris had shown time and time again that he was just a liar. And not only that, he was embarrassing his other ministers who would go out into the TV studios to defend Boris and his government, only to be then ripped to shreds by journalists saying, well, I'm sorry, but that's a lie. Not only that, but there's the investigation starting, well, I think next week indeed, about Boris Johnson lying to Parliament. Not only that, there's this bizarre thing about them that they seem to think that Boris has somehow changed. He really hasn't. The chaos that he brought into Downing Street is just going to come back. Nothing will change. Boris will just continue on to Johnson. And that will be the exact same thing. Another scandal will roll around, either the committee will come out and say, yes, he has, lied to Parliament. That will be another scandal in itself, but he will just go, as was always the case for him, just go from scandal to scandal to scandal to scandal with absolutely no ability to be able to command the leadership of the Tory party. He will just come in and just do his usual thing of going, hi, I'm Boris. Come on, guys, let's do something, and then just go. Like, that's how he used to conduct cabinet meetings. That's not how a meeting should be conducted, especially by the Prime Minister of this country. It blows my mind that he's even allowed to be Prime Minister, especially if you look back to his conduct when he was Mayor of London. But the only reason Boris is remembered even a remoteliest bit fondly of being Mayor of London was because he got massively incubated by having a team around him that basically did all the work. And even as Prime Minister, he wanted other people to do the work while he could get on and do all the fancy good stuff. And the problem is, you have to make decisions, and Boris does not make decisions. Take the Ukrainian war, for example. It was apparently Ben Wallace who marched into Johnson's office and said, lay down the law to Johnson that we will be supporting Ukraine, and that if he does not, Ben Wallace would have made an awful stink and then would have quit and resigned on the fact that Johnson would have refused to have backed Ukraine. We are looking at the replaceable of a man who is absolutely incapable of making any proper decisions, especially in a crunch. And at a time when our country is, again, swamped by crises, you need someone who can at least make a decision. He is not the man who should be put back in charge.
Deposed. Sadly, I've been proved right on that. But I think that if we had Boris back, then he's already got a mandate from the British people. And my email box is full up with people saying they want to have Boris back. So I see him as the great hope.
My word. This is where it is. Some people, I mean, that just sums it up, that you've got the Tory party in such dire straits that you have an MP going live on Sky News to say that Boris Johnson is the last hope of the Conservative Party.
And yet that's interesting. He did, of course, win a majority in 2019, but just before he resigned, 69% of the public, according to the polls, wanted him to go. He also lost the confidence of the party as well, didn't he? More than 60 MPs resigned in protest at him being Prime Minister.
Well,
let's see how he gets round to this, because, again, you've got to remember the fall of Boris Johnson was an incredibly chaotic one. If you can, well, it was only a couple of months ago, but it seems like a long time ago. It was very, very chaotic. They refused constantly, we can't have a leadership election now. We can't have a vote of no confidence now because war in Ukraine, crisis, whatever excuse they wanted to cook up. So now, legitimate reasons as to why Boris Johnson should not be the Prime Minister, the fact that polls showed he should leave as Prime Minister and resign, and numerous Tory MPs who would literally be hired and walk out in seconds and resign, telling him that he should go as well.
That was 60, but of course he tried to have a government from all parts of the party, and what happened in the end was that he was undermined by those people who are not real Conservatives, and I'm afraid.
Just what? Boris was undermined by people who are not real Conservatives. What? What? How? And then the best part was, he had a unity party. Well, We've said this before on many occasions. Johnson did not bring talent in around him. Johnson went and got the team of weakest loyalists he could find because he did not want anyone on this team to look too strong that might threaten him and make him look bad. Remember during the pandemic that Rishi Sunak did the same thing, was looking better than Boris, and there was talks that Boris wanted to get rid of him because he was too popular. He was stealing the limelight. He was making Boris look bad. So remember that.
There are too many people in the parliamentary party who are not real Conservatives.
He's still under investigation for the Privileges Committee.
I mean, I still can't get around that there are many people in the Conservative Party that aren't real Conservatives. This is how badly the split in the Tory Party really is. That you've got, Christopher Chope going, there are people in the Conservative Party who aren't real Conservatives. Well, what is a real Conservative to him? It's someone who follows Liz Truss's ideology. He's a free market fundamentalist. He wanted Liz Truss's policies, but as he said, people just couldn't see the brilliance of Liz Truss.
There's an investigation still going on over whether he misled Parliament. That could be problematic, couldn't it?
Well, I discount that. I think that if we elect him...
You just discount it? How can you just discount it that he's under investigation for lying to Parliament? I think that's something pretty hard to actually discount.
As our new Prime Minister, then he will command the authority of a majority of my parliamentary colleagues, and if people want to have noises off, then they can continue to do that. But I can't comment on the work of the Privileges Committee, except to say that they seem to...
And here he goes, trying to undermine the committee.
...have set themselves a very low bar for finding him guilty by not requiring that it should have been a deliberate misleading. He never deliberately misled the House of Commons.
Oh, yes. Johnson didn't deliberately mislead the House of Commons, but it's all right if he lied to the House of Commons. What? And you can already see them already. The lines that they have been practicing to try and sell to other MPs, to try and talk them into trying to back Boris to bring him back. The idea to try and bring back Boris Johnson is a non-starter. And if they did, it would be an absolutely ridiculous joke. Because first of all, we have been hearing a number of Tory MPs who would be absolutely flabbergasted at the idea that Boris would win. Not only that, numbers have either said two things. Well, if this happens, we'll defect to Labour. Or we'll just go and cause a by-election. Because we know you'll lose. And this isn't a small number. This is a growing chorus of people that have said this in response to Boris Johnson even potentially winning. So Johnson is in a hard place. And even if he says, oh, well, I'm back, and and I won all that big mandate or whatever, if I was Keir Starmer, I'd go, okay, then prove it. Have an election. Prove it. Because he won't. Boris Johnson, massively unpopular. The idea there's that Brexit coalition that he had in 2019, where he won this massive majority for, that's no longer there anymore. It's crumbled away. He won't win the red wall. The blue wall won't turn out to vote for him. It is going to be an absolute disaster. And if Labour are leading on like a 32, 36 points at the polls at the moment, people have just had enough of the Tory party. They've run out of steam, they've run out of ideas, and they've run out of credible people to put forward to be not only Prime Minister, but to be Secretary of State, Foreign Secretary, Trade Ministers, you name it. They've just run out of competent people.
Rishi Sunak hasn't formally declared yet, but it's widely thought that he will step forward. Some people will say he's the natural choice, given that he came second. He was runner-up to Liz Truss and went through that whole leadership campaign that lasted so many weeks over the summer.
Well, he's certainly not my natural choice, nor that of my constituents, because he was involved in undermining Boris Johnson and...
This is also the big argument as well. One of the reasons why Truss ended up winning in the end was that a lot of people, a lot of those Conservatives, did like, in a way, what Sunak was selling, but they just liked what Truss said more. Also, they could not get their heads around that in came Rishi like an assassin and just deposed Boris. So they cannot forgive him. And so many voted for Liz Truss out of sheer spite, knowing that this was what the decision was going to be. And here we are in this, well, this almighty mess that we are now in.
Showed his disloyalty, and I don't think... Did you ever hear him come to speak out in support of Liz Truss and say we should give her a bit of time and allow her a bit of room in order to develop her policies? No, he didn't. He and his acolytes were continually undermining her. So I think if you want to have a further divided Conservative Party, choose Rishi Sunak. But if you want a united party, he's not the answer.
Neither is Boris. Neither is Boris. If you've been hearing what other anti-Boris Tory MPs have been saying. But Rishi Sunak really is the only option the Tories have got. He's really the only option they've got. And then what happens? Well, all the anti-Sunak, the pro-Trussers, the free market fundamentalists, what do they start doing? They start causing problems for Sunak. And thus, we get back to the very root of the problem, that the Tory party has just become absolutely ungovernable because there are too many factions and there are too many fantasists, as we've seen through Brexit, through Trussonomics, because, again, this guy, he's perfectly fine with the policies that Truss did, just thinks that they weren't done, that right.
So do you think Liz Truss did nothing wrong?
Well, I'm not saying that she did nothing wrong. She admits herself that she made mistakes, and that's fair enough. But are we that unforgiving as a party? We call ourselves compassionate.
She tanked the economy. She tanked the pound. She sent mortgage prices into a complete spiral. This is what I mean by a lot of these free market, fundamentalists. They cannot get around that they are so married to their ideology, because as far as they are concerned, what Liz Truss did was right, and the markets were going to react badly. But as far as they're concerned, other party members, these non-conservatives in their own party, should have held their nerve, because it would have been all right. But then again, a lot of them, this is what Brexit was all about. Doing this mad, crazy, madcapped economic experiments that no one in their right mind would ever vote for.
Conservatives, but I haven't seen from a lot of my colleagues any compassion whatsoever for Liz Truss and her family, and I think that's unacceptable.
If Boris Johnson doesn't run, do you want a general election?
I think there should be a general election, because we need whoever becomes the leader, if it's not Boris Johnson, will need to have a proper mandate. And the only way to get a proper mandate is to go to the people. And I'm not pessimistic about the outcome of a general election now on the issue of putting our economy right. Do we want to have Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer and all the left of the Labour Party campaigning for higher taxes and more trade union disruption? Or do we want to have a Conservative government with a taking a fresh line on the economy.
Then that really sums it up. That really sums it up. But yeah, that's Christopher Cope coping massively for Boris. That is your typical average Boris supporter. And I guarantee you, you probably would be able to find it. Him and maybe some Tory MPs pushing a line that maybe Boris Johnson wasn't being Brexity enough, or maybe Boris wasn't being a bit, he wasn't a conservative. He was a bit more of a liberal. Just the factionalism in the Tory party is the problem. And they have not had a united leader, really, since David Cameron. Well, actually, not even David Cameron. You've probably got to go all the way back to, really, Margaret Thatcher. Because even John Major was dealing with some factionalism. And there are roots of the sort of the factionalism do go back to sort of that era. And the Eurosceptics and all the Maastricht Treaty stuff. And it only got worse under David Cameron when he was in coalition with the Lib Dems. The ERG started to express their power. More of these groups started to appear. And certainly after the Brexit referendum, more of these groups just started popping up left, right, and centre, going, if the ERG, such a small group of, 19 MPs? Sorry, 13 MPs at the time, can throw about their weight to essentially cause a massive economical change in the state of the UK, both policy-wise, domestic-wise, and foreign policy-wise, that maybe so we can do as well. And that's partly where we are now. Factionalism, folks. That is what will ultimately destroy the Tory party. But if after general election and they lose, they are going to go off into a massive civil war. They will fight tooth and nail for essentially the soul and direction of what they think the Tory party should go for. But the first thing sort of any sort of centrist or sort of right centrist Tory seriously needs to consider is getting rid of people like this free market fundamentalist idiot who thinks that Boris Johnson is somehow, as some sort of returning god from the lost valleys of I don't know where, but it's pathetic. It really is. And if Boris Johnson does get put back in place as Prime Minister, it will be the worst Tory joke this country has ever heard. But unfortunately, people like Christopher Cope are serious about trying to tell that joke. So as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.